Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of Beyond the Script. And we're just a couple of minutes late. We had to do a little finagling with the going live time just to get our Facebook audience in. And as many of you know, those of you who've been with us, fresh, natural, and live show every Monday evening, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, 7 o'clock Central. And I'm here with my superstar panel. I want to start off with the lineup. As you know, I'm Dr. Bax Montgomery, a cardiologist, and I'm here in Houston. And here at Montgomery Heart and Wellness, we use a nutritional approach to help our patients reverse their disease. We have Dr. Celeste Palmer, as a board-certified pediatrician, who has taken a particular interest in nutrition as a means of healing her pediatric patients in a more global approach, in addition to the allopathic approach. Dr. Pamela Atkins is with us. She's a graduate of Morehouse College of Medicine, specialist in family practice. Dr. Atkins focuses on the integrative approach, blending traditional care with a holistic care to ensure the best outcomes for her patients. Also, our star speaker tonight is Esosa Edosomwan. She is the raw girl, is a dynamic certified nutrition specialist, also a behavioral coach and a published author with 10 years of experience in inspiring others to live their best and healthiest lives. And last but not least is Dr. Floyd Atkins. He's a graduate of Morehouse College. He is board certified in foot surgery in 1990. He currently pursues his passions as an author, a wellness educator, and a consultant at the Center for Wellness and Healing here in Houston, Texas. So welcome, everybody, to our show. We're glad to have you here. And as you know, we present a topic every week that stimulates the conversation. And I'm really excited about the topic tonight. We're going to talk about how bitter is better. We talked in the previous conversation, we talked about the whole concept of taste and taste buds, and we got into sugar cravings. And so we asked Esosa to lead us in a discussion on the benefits, the health benefits of bitter foods, or so-called bitter foods. Now, what's bitter to one person may not be bitter to another, and she's going to get into this. So without further ado, Esosa, why is bitter better?
Good evening, everybody. I am going to start my slides, but I have a personal experience with bitter foods. Breaking my sugar addiction. And I was really surprised to learn that there's so many things, so many reasons why bitter is better. Let me know if you can see my slides.
We can see them.
Okay, cool. All right, awesome. So let's just get right on into it. So the 5 core flavors that really should be a part of our meals or our repertoire are sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. And umami is sometimes replaced with pungent. And these flavors are important because at various points in our lifespan, we might find that we start gravitating to eating more of some of these flavors. So if you're looking at this, what I want you to ask yourself is if there is one of these flavors that you are tending to eat more than others. Are you eating a ton of sweet foods? Are you eating a ton of salty foods, sour, bitter, umami, or pungent? Pungent would be like spicy. Now, there's really, really specific reasons why taste matters. So in ancient forms of medicine, I'm talking about traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, Native American protocols, even African healing protocols. The mechanism of taste and flavor is actually used to bring your body back into balance and promote good health. In this chart I have right here, this is actually showing how the different core flavors affect the doshas. Now, the doshas come from Ayurveda, and the doshas correspond to the elements, the major elements. So earth, water, fire, air. And for each person, usually you have two doshas. The 3 doshas are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, but usually you have 2 and one that's more predominant in you. So I'm a Pitta Vata. But if you look at this chart, you can see that all the up arrows show that how these particular flavors are actually aggravating to a certain type. And then the down arrows show that these flavors are balancing. So for instance, if I was a kapha and I ate a lot of sweet foods, that's going to throw me out of balance. If I was a kapha and I ate a lot of sour foods, that's going to throw me out of balance, or a lot of salty foods. If I was a pitta, I actually am a pitta, so salty will throw me out of balance. Pungent, which is very true. Spicy foods would throw me out of balance, and sour foods would throw me out of balance. And the only dosha that doesn't do well with bitter foods is actually vata. If they're eating too much bitter, that actually can be aggravating to vata. Too much astringent can be aggravating to vata, and too much pungent. So as you can see, this is pretty cool. I mean, I use the doshas in my practice all the time, and I find them so fascinating because I can look at someone and see how if I know their dosha, and see how they're eating and figure out what kinds of foods that are predominant in their diet are actually throwing their body off of balance. All right, so this is what most of us think when we think bitter foods. We think ill. Like generally speaking, people don't like to eat bitter foods. If for some reason you are about that bitter foods life, go ahead and hashtag bitter foods life and put in the comments. I doubt there's probably gonna be like 2 people. But everywhere in the world, all cultures in the world usually have bitter foods that are staples. I'm Nigerian. We have bitter herbs. We have all kinds of bitter foods in our culture. For whatever reason, the standard American diet has no bitter foods. Pretty much we focus on sweet foods. We focus on salty, sour, and sometimes we get into umami or pungent if we're incorporating an international cuisine into our diet. But generally speaking, bitter foods are the least popular, but they happen to be actually the most metabolically active of the 5 core flavors. All right, so something you may not know, which I thought was really interesting, is that your genetics actually influence your perception of bitter foods. So we all have these multiple taste receptors. In scientific literature, they call them the TAS2Rs or the T2Rs. All humans have 25 different bitter taste genes, and each one actually is tuned to pick up different groups of chemicals, which means that individuals can actually be high or low responders for one group of chemicals versus another, which will shape their preference for one group of bitter foods over another. So you might be somebody who loves coffee, but you can't stand grapefruit, and both of them are bitters. But it's all relative. It depends on the person. The other thing that was interesting is that there's a group of people who are more adverse to or have a really high sensitivity to bitter foods, and they usually are the people who eat less vegetables. So they're eating 25% fewer vegetables than everyone else, but that also makes them at greater risk for colon cancer. So if you're someone who can't stand vegetables, the bad news is you're putting yourself at greater risk for a whole bunch of chronic diseases. So you want to see how you can incorporate bitter in and slowly but surely change your palate so they become more palatable to you. What are bitters? Well, they're basically a category of bioactive compounds. You could also call this phytochemicals, plant chemicals, for which the tongue happens to have specialized taste receptors, which register a bitter taste in the brain. And they actually register in the brain in something called the gustatory cortex. And that's the part of our brain that's responsible for the perception of taste. The interesting part about this is that you can't get away. You have to eat plants in order to get these bioactive compounds. So if you look at this little chart here, I have some phytochemicals. There's curcumin, which is in turmeric. There's resveratrol, which is in grapes or wine. There's EGCG, which is in like green tea or matcha tea. All of these are bitter compounds. The thing about bitters is, generally speaking, I think the general consensus was that the bitter taste was sort of an evolutionary protective mechanism to help us avoid poisonous plants, because poisonous plants generally are very, very, very bitter. And they may also be a protective mechanism for the plant itself to keep away, act like a natural pesticide. Because if you look at like sprouts or little seedlings, they actually usually have more bitter compounds in them. So it could have worked both ways. They were kind of protective for the plant itself and also protective for humans to keep us from eating stuff that could kill us. But there are variations on the level, obviously, of the level of bitterness of certain foods. Now, this is the part that I found fascinating. So I talked about how there are multiple taste receptors. They call them the TAS2Rs or the T2Rs. And when they first discovered these, they actually thought that they were only in the mouth. But then later they figured out that they were everywhere. So they're in the mouth, they're in the soft palate, they're in the nasopharynx, the larynx, the esophagus, the intestine, even in the heart, in our airways, in our kidneys, and in our brains. And if you look at this chart that I have, this picture that I have here, you can see that there are, the blue is the areas that are only sweet receptors. The purple is where both bitter and sweet are. And then the pink is where just bitter are. And you can see that the lungs, they're also in the lungs there as well. So it's really, really fascinating.
I don't see the liver. So I was told that bitter foods or bitter herbs are cleansing to the liver. Is anything regarding the receptors on the liver? Just out of curiosity.
And interestingly enough, I didn't see anything about there being receptors there, but I could see how eating them would be detoxifying for the liver, though.
Gotcha.
Yeah. All right. So there's at least 50 different bitter taste receptors throughout the body that not only participate in our sensory system, but they also play important roles for digestion and metabolism. And these bitter taste receptors can sense literally thousands of bitter compounds. So there's a lot of bitter compounds that can bind with these different receptors. The cool part is that they can have epigenetic effects. So they can ultimately activate our DNA to express optimal health potential. Here's the thing. This is actually from a review that I found in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. The debittering of the human diet is a massive public health problem. I'll read a little quote from it. Dietary phytonutrients found in vegetables and fruit appear to lower the risk of cancer and cardiovascular disease. The studies on the mechanism of chemoprotection have focused on the biological activity of these bitter plant compounds. Increasing the phytonutrient content of plant foods through selective breeding or genetic improvement is a potent dietary option for disease prevention. However, most, if not all, of these bioactive compounds are bitter, acrid, or astringent, and therefore aversive to the consumer. As a result, the food industry routinely removes these compounds from plant foods through selective breeding and a variety of debittering processes. So this review that I found was just talking about how it would be great if we could actually increase these bioactive compounds in plants to support disease prevention, health, et cetera, but that the average consumer can't handle it. And so the food industry is doing actually the opposite. So some of the ways that bitters are removed from our diet: modern food production in general, ultra processing of foods, and then GMOs. And this is another reason why you can tell someone that organic is better than GMOs, because genetic modifications of plants is an intentional way that they change the flavor profile to be sweeter and less bitter. And they do this across the board. The food industry removes phenols, flavonoids, isoflavones, terpenes, glucosinolates. All of these are phytochemicals from plant foods through selective breeding and a variety of debittering processes. So we're literally we're having a crisis in the sense that our palates are being changed, whether we like it or not. And then if you're already on the process side, you're probably doing a lot more harm. So even if you are eating really healthy, it is a better idea to go for organic as much as possible.
It's also, sorry to interject. I mean, it's a great point you raised here. And it was actually related to a question I was going to ask. You know, when I eat food out of my garden, or we get food from local growers,
yeah,
I notice that food is less sweet than what I get out of the supermarket, even the organic stuff that I get out of the supermarket.
Yeah.
And when you said that, I was going to ask that question toward the end, but when you brought this up, I mean, could it be that even the organic plants are genetically modified to some extent? I mean, the organic criteria is a criteria, but I mean, can you shed some light on that?
It really could be. I don't know for sure, but I feel like the way that things, the problem is a lot of these genetically engineered crops kind of like colonize, like their seed spreads and affects other crops.
Uh-huh.
So I wouldn't be surprised if, you know what I mean, if some of the things that are labeled organic aren't exactly completely organic. Um, I feel like we just have to do our research on where we're buying from and who we're buying from. Even if you go to a farmer's market, ask them questions, you know?
Can I come in real quick? The organic, I've done some reading on organic. The organic label is a government funded type of label.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't mean that there's no chemicals used. It means that it's government approved chemicals used with the growing of the plant. The problem also in the grocery store, like Dr. Montgomery was saying, foods from a garden taste totally different because things in the grocery store are harvested before they are done.
Yes.
It's cooking basically. And so you can tell that difference because if you get an apple, for example, from a tree in your backyard and an apple from the grocery store, the apple from the grocery store has been harvested months or even a year in advance, set to the side. And then, they do a processing to mature it to be able to be ready for shelf versus from off of the tree, you're getting the true nutrients and minerals straight from Mother Earth. So organic is the issue. And also the harvesting of pre-ripened food is also an issue.
That's a good one, Celeste. Yeah. And Aris Latem, the raw food chef, I remember he always talks about, like, he says it like, you're not getting sunfire food. Because like when you take the food out of the sun or you take it out before it's ripe, it doesn't have more time to mature and get more sunlight. So I agree with all of that. That makes a lot of sense. All right. So let's get into my bitter is better. This is inspired by Dr. Montgomery. Thank you very much for saying bitter is better so often. So what I did is I made better an acronym, and I'm gonna use these to go through a few reasons why bitter foods are great. This is just a few. Honestly, there's so many. I just wanted to nail it down to a few to start the conversation. So B for me is break sugar addiction. We all know we just talked about the health crisis and the fact that our food is being debittered. Type 2 diabetes is skyrocketing. Insulin resistance is a thing for most people. Obesity is a thing. And the more sugar we eat, the more sugar we crave. It's a perpetual addictive cycle. And so as we know, we eat the sugar, we like it, it's addictive, then our blood sugar levels spike, and then insulin secreted, our blood sugar levels drop, we get hangry, and then we go eat some more sugar. And it just keeps going and going. And the reason why bitter foods are really great for breaking sugar addiction is actually because bitter and sweet are kind of in opposition in the brain. So we saw that they have bitter taste receptors and sweet taste receptors and all of that. But when we consume the bitter foods, we actually can help suppress the desire to have more sugar. And this is what I use with my clients all the time. If I see someone is sugar addicted, I don't tell them to stop eating sugar. I'm sneaky about it. And I tell them to start drinking Pod Arco tea once a day or green tea, with no sugar once a day or whatever it is. And just by doing these little things over time, what you'll see is their palates will change. Their desire for sugar will just go away. And it makes it easier and easier to then have more bitter foods because it's the same thing. Just as we continue to crave sugar when we eat it, once we have bitter foods, we actually start to adjust to it and we're able to accept other bitter foods because of that.
Is there an upregulation of bitter receptors when you stimulate bitter foods or downregulation? Do we know the mechanism behind that?
That's a great question. I think there might be an upregulation of bitter receptors. I'd have to confirm that though. I can't remember what I read about it, but that is a great question. I think that might be why, as you keep eating them, you start to feel even more comfortable consuming them. It's a good one.
We hold on one second. We had a comment here. I didn't want to put that one up there. Someone says, Stafford, I use a barrel gas before meals. It's a bitter OTC over the counter. Is that a natural substance? A barrel gas? Anybody know what that is?
I have no idea what that is.
I asked that question.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, I asked the question in the chat. They didn't respond yet, so we'll see. Anyway, sorry about that. Go ahead.
No problem. All right. So the first E in better is enhanced digestion. I have here the low stomach acid symptoms because generally speaking, as we get older, our digestive processes just start to weaken. A lot of people are having a lot of issues. 15% of people over 65 usually have low stomach acid. I feel like the number of people with low stomach acid that are much younger is also pretty high. I feel like I see it all the time in my practice. Sometimes it gets misdiagnosed and people are put on antacids, even though they have stomach acid symptoms, low stomach acid symptoms. So it's a thing. And some of the symptoms may be belching after meals, bloating, heartburn, gas, undigested food in your stool, acne, anemia, mineral deficiencies, intestinal infections, chronic candida. Sometimes also thinning hair is a thing for low stomach acid. And low stomach acid is an issue also because it leads to malabsorption of nutrients, especially nutrients that need an acidic environment in order to be absorbed. Things like zinc, B12, manganese, calcium, they all need an acidic environment to be absorbed properly. And so this can lead to deficiencies that cause other issues in the body. The cool part about bitters is that you can take bitters before meals to actually encourage the stomach cells because they produce more acid when they're in contact with bitters. A really great one that I use a lot of times for low stomach acid is gentian. And gentian is pretty mild. I know some people use things like betaine, HCl, but I like gentian better because it doesn't bother people as much. It doesn't have any adverse crazy symptoms. And it will stimulate, having these herbs at the start of the meal stimulate the bitter receptors, which then upregulate gastric acid production. So it's a great way to get your stomach acid up. And then the other thing is that eating bitter also will stimulate your gallbladder to produce bile. So it helps with the digestion of fats. If you're eating a lot of fatty foods, or if you're someone who had a really fatty diet and for a really long time, and your gallbladder is sluggish, then eating bitter foods is also going to help you get your gallbladder going. The first T in better is for tend to heart health. We talked a little bit about the fact that there actually are bitter receptors in the heart. I found that super fascinating. Those receptors are thought to be important in regulating the strength of the contractions of the heart. And research has also shown that stimulation of the bitter receptors in the heart can actually improve blood pressure control. And so one of the biggest classes of bitter compounds is flavonoids. And flavonoids are a really large group of phytochemicals. There's actually, I think, 6 subclasses. And so there's a lot. It's basically like eating the rainbow. You can see here that if you berries, all kinds of berries, strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, green tea, red wine, black tea, kale, arugula, red cabbage. I mean, this also includes even citrus, different things like that. So all of these are high flavonoid foods. And if you see on the right, this chart here shows that the more flavonoids we're consuming, the greater our risk for cardiovascular disease decreases. So as we consume more flavonoids, we decrease our risk for cardiovascular disease, which is a really great thing. And the reason why is because flavonoids are well known to protect against the oxidation of LDL cholesterol, which interrupts the process of atherosclerosis. So it's going to stop that progression into heart disease. So we can use it as a preventative measure. And then I think this is also why plant-based diet works so well when people actually do have cardiovascular disease as well. It's another reason, at least. The The next T is for trim down belly fat. This photo is just here for inspiration. These are some of my ageless heroes. You too can have abs over 60 if you exercise. And also if you eat your broccoli, and that's because of a phytochemical called sulforaphane. Sulforaphane is found in broccoli sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts, most of the brassicas, cabbage, bok choy, watercress. And it's really effective for belly fat and also just getting slim. So the study that I found was a study done in 2017 in the journal Diabetes, which is published by the American Diabetes Association. And they found that mice that were fed a diet high in sulforaphane gained 15% less weight than the control group. And they also found that those same mice saw a 28% reduction in their visceral fat or their belly fat, along with a notable decrease in their glucose levels. So sulforaphane was really integral in reducing the belly fat. It also accelerated the browning. It also can accelerate the browning of adipose tissue. So it will encourage the body to take white fat cells and turn them into active beige or brown calorie burning fat cells. So this leads to us burning more calories every single day. The other thing that sulforaphane does is it can help you improve your gut bacteria. So it can help with increase the amount of good bacteria in your gut, which is also, as we know, really helpful for weight loss and combating obesity. All right.
And a good source of that again is what? What are the foods on that one?
All of the brassicas. So kale, cabbage, bok choy, cauliflower, broccoli, all of those.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Good.
And then E is the next E is for enhance brain functioning. So I talked about how there's bitter receptors found in the brain, which is so interesting. And all of these receptors, wherever they're found, they're serving some purpose. People are still trying to figure out what all the purposes are. But some of the previous research has shown that bitter tasting iso-alpha acids in the hops plant. Now, hops is an herb. It's also used in beer. So it's what gives beer that taste. But you can get hops outside of beer. I've had kombucha with hops in it. There's other way you can have hops. And they showed in the research that it can help prevent brain inflammation and Alzheimer's pathologies in mice. Bitter compounds in general can also possibly delay memory problems associated with aging through multiple mechanisms, including increasing blood flow to the brain, and also reducing inflammation overall. The other thing that bitter compounds do when it comes to brain has to do with our mood. So things like resveratrol or quercetin, they actually can help regulate neurotransmitters that impact our mood. So dopamine, serotonin, noradrenaline. So not only are we enhancing our brain function, we also can improve our mood.
Gotcha.
All right. Last but not least, the R is for reduce blood sugar levels and appetite. So when we consume bitter foods, the bitter receptors that are in the gut actually get activated, and they stimulate hormones like leptin and adiponectin, which are really important satiety hormones. So what it does is it makes us feel full. We're not going to overeat. If we are prone to overeat, eating bitter foods is actually going to help us slow down on that a bit. And the bitter compounds found in, I've talked about resveratrol a lot, but also specifically in resveratrol, which is found in higher concentrations in red wine, grapes, etc., can improve insulin sensitivity even in diabetics. And there are other bitter components like EGCG, which is in green tea or matcha tea, and berberine. Those have all been widely observed to regulate glucose levels. So there's two things happening here. It can help us feel full, and also is going to help us maintain reduce our blood sugar levels if they're high, or maintain stable blood sugar levels. All right. At this point, you might be like, but how? But how? And whenever I say but how, I always think about Kanye saying houseway. So I looked at a bunch of research and I was trying to figure this out. And it was really interesting because it seems like most of the researchers are literally saying the same thing. They're like, how? Houseway. Because the researchers are not in an agreement with how the bitter foods are causing some of these benefits, because there's just so many compounds. There's so many receptors. They all seem to have different mechanisms of action. So for instance, I was looking at why do bitter foods do what they do for our digestion. And in this one study, there were 4 different theories. The 2 predominant ones were that when you stimulate the bitter receptors, you increase saliva, and then that increases vagal stimulation to our digestive organs. And then all of a sudden we're digesting better. The other theory was that if the stimulation of the receptors in the mouth and in the gastrointestinal tracts locally actually increase digestive secretion. So there seem to be different theories about how this happens, and people are still trying to understand the physiological processes that bitter compounds are needed for, because they present in so many areas of the body. There was research done on the gene TAS2R38, and that's the gene that actually codes for bitter receptors. And there were so many variants on the genes that basically the researchers decided that this gene had to serve some other function beyond oral sensory perception. So it's getting to the place where people are realizing, hey, like, these bitters are not just about our taste. They do something. They do a lot of things for us, and we need to better understand them. There was evidence that also suggested that the T2Rs, which are bitter receptors that are throughout the body, mediate non-tasting roles through specialized mechanisms, and that these receptors and their polymorphisms are associated with human disorders and disease. So that if we are not stimulating the bitter receptors, if anything gets altered with the bitter receptors, et cetera, that actually those changes can then correspond to having some sort of health condition. One thing I did see in a research study that I thought was really interesting also too was that the bitter taste receptors that I mentioned, TAS2Rs or T2Rs, they belong to the superfamily of 7 transmembrane G protein coupled receptors, which are the targets of over 50% of drugs currently on the market. So a lot of the drugs that we're using to treat people are actually also targeting these bitter receptors. So there has to be something to them. So in order to recap.
A couple of questions that came up in the panel. You mentioned berberine.
Yeah.
Faye Parker asked, what's your recommendation for taking berberine to lower blood sugar? We use berberine supplements. Anybody, if you want to chime in on this, do you use a berberine supplement, or do you get them sourced as a natural fruit? Or
I think I would love to hear Dr. Atkins' thought on this, but I usually don't start with trying to lower people's blood sugar levels using supplements.
Yeah, we use plant-based diet, and it's effective that way. We use berberine. Berberine, it helps with blood sugar, but we also use it with lipids. But it inhibits. Boy, I'm blanking on the enzyme, but it helps lower LDL cholesterol as well.
Okay.
But anyway, that's Anyway, but Floyd, Pam, or Celeste, any comments on berberine?
Well,
so we have had benefits with blood sugar, but that's about it.
I would start with your diet, honestly.
Yep.
And supplementation when it comes to blood sugar levels, I feel like can be an add-on if it feels like things aren't progressing. But I always start with people's diet.
Yeah, there was another question on apple cider vinegar. Let me see if I can find that.
I
Go ahead, Pam.
I just want to say, I think I accidentally muted myself, but I tend to agree with the Esosa. I would start with the diet. I think a lot of times when we have blood sugar issues, we want a magic pill or herb to bring our blood sugar down, but the root cause is what we're eating. But when we change our diet, then the herbs can enhance the low blood sugar lowering effect, and of course exercise to help the blood sugar go into the cells, and but there are all these, the berberine can be used, but I would not put my money on that. I'll put my money on changing my diet. That would be the most important thing to start with.
And to follow up real quick, Deep Park 1240 apple cider vinegar.
And I heard you asked about apple cider vinegar.
Yes, I put that on the screen. But they asked about apple cider vinegar. Can apple cider vinegar be taken before meals to help with digestion of foods and bowel?
Okay, so apple cider vinegar. Go ahead.
Anybody?
Yes, it can.
Okay.
What?
Right.
You want to dilute it.
What I usually say is to take apple cider vinegar on an empty stomach because can you hear me?
Yeah, you're in and out, but keep going. Helps you out. I think you're frozen. I see the sound. Esosa, you want to comment?
I think what she was going to say is that you should take it on an empty stomach, and you can take it before meals. It'll stimulate. It'll help you digest your food better. So I would just say, just make sure that you dilute it, because some people just start like trying to like swig it straight, and that's not good for your teeth, the enamel in your teeth, and other things.
I remember talking to the PhD that worked for the company that makes apple cider vinegar. They said that this was over 10 years ago, and they said that the published data they had at that time is that.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
A1C. Oh, we can hear you now, Pam. I think you're in and out. It lowers hemoglobin A1C. Someone was asking me the other day, does it burn fat? Anybody know anything? What are the benefits of apple cider vinegar in general? Improved digestion. Can we consider one of the bitter foods that does all the bitter, wonderful bitter things?
It can be considered a bitter food, for sure.
Okay. Anyway, I get that question a lot. I guess we spent a little time on it, but thanks for that insight. I'm sorry, so go ahead and continue.
Okay. All right. So just to sum up. Oh, wait. Dr. Atkins?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Off and on. I think it's in and out.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I think apple cider vinegar also is going in and out.
Yeah, we can hear you. It's a little bit out, but keep going. Well, oops, a little shaky. I tell you what, Pam, go out.
There seems to be a delay.
Log back in.
Okay.
Log out and log back in.
It has an alkalizing effect, which.
Okay, hear you.
Oh.
Yeah, just log out. Go ahead and
okay.
So we'll pick up that comment toward the end of your presentation.
Okay. All right. So I just want to summarize some keys from the presentation. The first one is that we can actually use the taste and flavors of our food to bring our bodies back into balance and promote good health. So pay attention to what you're eating, the predominant flavors and tastes you're eating. And if you need to, work with a practitioner to figure out what is causing you to be off balance. And the second major key is that our genetics can determine how we respond to bitter foods. Not everyone's going to respond the same way. Some people can't stand vegetables. Some people love them. Some people can, there are certain compounds we might like more than other compounds, et cetera. So we just need to start somewhere. The last key is that we should just start eating more bitters, and that's going to increase our tolerance for them and will help us be better. So we will be able to break sugar addiction, enhance our digestion, tend to our heart health, trim belly fat, enhance our brain functioning, and reduce our blood sugar levels and appetite. And so I just want to go over a few. There is a really long list of bitter foods. If you haven't noticed yet, bitter foods are really just like mostly plant foods. If you're eating a ton of plant foods, you're going to get enough bitter. There obviously are some that register more bitter than others to some people, right? So on this list that I wrote here, I have arugula, artichoke, endive, radicchio, kale, bitter melon, dandelion green, seaweeds, cacao. But I have a really long list of bitter foods, and you're welcome to download it all. I'll give you guys the link when I'm done with this presentation. And then there's also bitter teas or tonics that you can drink. Some of these are some of my favorites, like matcha green tea. I drink that almost every single day. There's arguments as to how much more antioxidants it has than green teas, but I would say it probably has at least 10 to 20 times more antioxidants than green tea. It's really antioxidant potent. Then there's green tea. There's reishi. Reishi is a medicinal mushroom. It's an immune modulator. It's an adaptogen. I use reishi tonics at night, and that's because there's research that shows that reishi can actually help decrease the amount of time it takes to get to sleep and increase deep sleep. And I've used it to help me regulate my sleep when I travel, and it works really well. And then there's yerba mate, which is a really amazing coffee substitute. It is bitter, but it does everything that coffee does, but kind of is the opposite of coffee. Coffee is acidic. Yerba mate is alkalizing. It also has minerals in it, magnesium, potassium, I think even a little bit of iron, and manganese. And yerba mate is also, it has kind of like adaptogenic qualities. So instead of getting that like caffeine jitter that people get from coffee, yerba mate actually usually pretty steady, which is kind of cool. Then we have powdered arca bark tea, another good bitter tea. I also use it for getting rid of candida, sage tea, black seed oil, moringa bitters, herbal bitters. There's so many different types of bitter concoctions you can take that are like a combination of herbs, etc. What I will say as a general disclaimer is if you are taking medication, you want to be careful with anything that is on the herb side and make sure that you actually work with your health practitioner and make sure that it's not going to negatively interact. But generally speaking, most bitter foods can be eaten without a problem because most of them are vegetables. Most of them are vegetables or fruits, and you can figure it out, and it'll be really easy to incorporate in your diet. So I'll leave you with this place to start. You got two options. One gets you extra credit, and the other one's kind of like, okay, cool. So the first one is you could either do one bitter tonic in the morning or the evening, or you can do 1 to 2 meals in your day. You can just add some bitter foods. And if you want extra credit, you do both. So you do one bitter tonic in the morning or evening, and you add at least to at least 2 meals a day, you add bitter foods. And if you want to get the handout that has the really long list of all the bitter foods and tonics, that is the link. And Dr. Montgomery, if you can put up the link somehow, that would be cool. And that way I can sign out of this thing.
I'll put that link. I'll tell you what, let me do this. Let me type this in the chat.
Okay.
Hold on. And what I'll do is I'll also put it in the and I have your PowerPoint. I should just go ahead and copy it from there. Hold on 1 second. Let me do that so I don't have to rely on my typos.
Okay.
I'm gonna copy this, paste it in the. Now there was a great question that just came up. Let me get to that in just a minute. Related to okay, the link is in the chat, and I'll also I'll also place that link in the show notes after I'm done, or edit the show notes that has a link. Now, there was a question regarding, okay, yeah. So D part 1240, great question tonight. Will consuming bitter foods with dressings and sauces to make them more palatable reduce their effectiveness and benefits? So I would imagine that she may have bitter greens, but she may be adding sauces or dressing that may be a little bit sweet to counter the bitter. So does that take away the effect of the bitter? I mean, I had a similar question because when I drink my bitter tea, I don't add sugar to the tea, but I may eat dates while I'm drinking the tea.
Comedy.
So it's the same question. So I guess you can help us out. And hopefully you'll tell us it's okay.
I will say that it is way better for you to leave the dates alone while you're drinking your bitter tea, or to leave the whole point of it is to at least have some point in your day where you grin and bear it. You just deal with it. You got to eat it bitter to get the full benefits. And that is the part that changes your sugar cravings. But if you're constantly sort of like mediating between the two, I don't think it's going to give you as much.
Stimulate the whole process, right?
So bitter, in other words, bittersweet diplomacy doesn't work. In other words, okay.
No.
No, I understand. But that's a good point, because I mean, I do it with my tea. Like if I have salads, I'm okay with bitter greens and things like that, because I don't know, I guess it has its place in salads. Tea, I'm indifferent. Sometimes I drink it without my eating dates, and sometimes I drink it with eating dates. But I think it's good to know. And I guess I like D Park will have to be more intentional with our solid bitter foods. Now, I guess you did say that it's possible for someone to eat too much bitter, but is that pretty rare? Is that correct?
It's only if you're a Vata type. I see some of my clients in the comments. If I've told you you're a Vata, then you really you can calm down with the bitter foods. You don't have to go so crazy with it. But the Vatas, you'll know if you're a Vata. Vatas are usually really thin, have a really strong, high metabolism. They burn. They usually can't gain muscle very easily, and they are actually aggravated by it. Their constitution would be aggravated by way too much bitter foods. But everybody else has no excuse. So
Gotcha. A few other questions. Here's a question by Patricia Lachey. I used to take liquid Swedish bitters. Can you tell me why it seems to help with minimizing menstrual cramps? I mean, Swedish bitters? What are liquid Swedish bitters, first and foremost? Anybody know that?
I've seen them in the health food store and Whole Foods and stuff, and I don't remember what herbs are in there, but it's one of those. I was saying there's a whole bunch of like these bitter liquid supplement kind of things you could take. When I was living in Crown Heights, I used to take these ones I would get from Rastas, and they had all these different herbs in them. Why do they help with menstrual cramps? Well, I don't know. Maybe because it's the anti-inflammatory effects. I mean, there also might be some herbs in there that actually have nutrients that you need. A lot of people need magnesium, iron, B vitamins and stuff when they're on their period. Maybe there's some nutrient content in there that's actually just helping you. A lot of people, when they're on their period, actually do the opposite of what's going to make the period easier to deal with. So if you're eating a lot of sugar when you're on your period, you're actually going to increase your menstrual pain, increase all of your symptoms, all that stuff, because that's also going to affect your hormones. So the bitter would be the opposite. So that's probably why you start to feel a little bit better.
So one approach would be to get women who are having menstrual problems to consume more bitter foods.
Well, definitely more bitter foods, but I mean, so menstrual cramps, we could go into a whole session on it.
All right. Well, save that for another show.
But basically, a lot of women don't realize that heavy cramping and really horrific periods actually are a sign of estrogen dominance. And that's a whole thing on its own, because you really do have to change your diet and balance your hormones and fix that. Because that's not a simple problem. That's a serious problem.
All right, Dr. Atkins, we're going to get your microphone fixed. We've got a show for you. Hormone balancing.
Can you hear me now?
that this is great stuff. So in balance, I know you gave us the diet and what have you. And I think I need to look at my food prescription system and quantify, take the bitter aspect, or take those 5 flavors in the context of how we classify our foods. And when we're doing our detoxes, maybe we need to go more bitter with some of our sicker patients. Did you see any data showing that a more aggressive nutritional detox will have more bitter foods?
No, but I would guess that it would have more bitter foods. Were you going to say something, Dr. Atkins?
Yeah, I was going to say, just looking at your list, I noticed that a lot of the bitter foods and comments, again, goes back to the green foods, the moringas, the grass, and all of those are detoxifiers. Everything loaded with chlorine are going to be natural detoxifiers. So I think that would be a good option to definitely include in a detox program, using your greens, your moringa, your green powders, your green drinks, your wheatgrass, spirulina also. I guess the one question asked about the bitter when it's Swedish, while you were answering that question, I was researching it, but you were absolutely right. The inflammation and immunity were one of 2 main benefits of the Swedish bitters, along with just it being good for digestion. It's a good digestive aid. And also I did the research on that, what's that, Iberoblast?
Iberogast?
Yes.
Iberogast?
Yes. Did you look that up? But again, that was it's aid in digestion. People take it before meals to help digest food properly.
Is it an herb, or what is it? Is it a green plant?
It's from an herb. Go ahead, Dr. Pam.
It's a combination. I think that's a brand name. I looked it up, but it are a combination of herbs, but that are helpful to digestion. So the combination I see, there may be more than one combination made by different companies. It's chamomile flowers, caraway, angelica, which is calming, milk thistle, which is good for the liver detoxification, and something called bitter candy tuft. I've never heard of that one, but I guess it's a combination that's helpful for bloating, digestive problems, IBS, etc. But that's a combination that may be a brand name or a known combination, but it's not one herb.
Gotcha. So basically a combination. Here's a question from, whoops, not the one I'm trying to get. The question from Deepak, can wheatgrass shots count as bitter tonic? I would think so. Any comments on wheatgrass?
Yeah, for sure. Wheatgrass is super bitter. That's why everyone's always like trying to take a orange slice afterwards, calm it down.
I'll do a shot of it.
Yeah, and then from Donna A, can we juice some of the bitter greens and drink it for the same benefits occasion as well as eating daily greens? So juicing bitter greens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we're going to have to work on a juice feast to make our juices. When I would do my juice feast, when I was first coached on it, I was coached to do at least one juice with all greens in it. And then the regular other juice to have greens plus fruit to kind of mix it to make it satisfying. Would the panel agree with that, or should I do 2 juices with all greens?
Sometimes it really depends on what someone can handle. Sometimes you have to meet people where they are. And if they really are just like literally holding their nose to try to get the all green in, I'm like, okay, put a little green apple in there.
Yeah.
To make it slightly more, you know what I mean? Palatable.
Yeah.
It actually matters that they get it down more. So
I remember once, well, actually it was my very first juice feast many years ago. And so the drug reps would come in and my staff said, look, he's not going to talk to you unless you go buy juice. So they had to go to like the central market store not far from us. And I would do one green juice and I would do like a apple beet and some other things. And so there was one rep, and I don't know if she was just trying to be smart or not, but she got 4 large, like 4 of the 32 ounces of all green juice. And I didn't want to waste it, but it was a bitter juice at the time. So I drank all of them all day. And so that whole day, that whole morning, I drank all those. I mean, I called it the green nasty. I gave it a nickname just to help me. But the interesting thing is that after I went through those 4 juices, those 4 green nasties, 32 ounces, I just kind of chugged them because I didn't want to sip it because it'd be more painful. But after a while, the juices, then my taste buds changed where then they would have a creamy, satisfying taste to them. It wasn't sweet, but it was sort of a creamy, smooth taste. And so I could identify that. And every time I drink that juice, it has that same creamy taste. And so it's interesting how my taste buds changed. That was very early on. So I guess doing more bitter shots can help out as well. This question you answered, are seaweeds considered bitter? Can you comment on the different types of seaweeds that may be better? Are there, I mean, I hear like, I know wakame is supposed to be pretty good, but kelp I hear is contaminated with stuff. I mean, anybody comment on seaweeds?
Yeah, I was just going to say you want to be careful where you get it from because our oceans are contaminated, but seaweed's an excellent source of minerals and iodine, but unfortunately because man has contaminated it, you want to try to find a more pristine source of it. That's my concern. What do you think, Esosa?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And especially because nowadays everything's so polluted. The other thing I was going to say is this seaweeds are interesting because I kind of put it on my list, but then I was like, they also could be considered salty, because a lot of times they're usually added salt to it or they're just salty because they're from the ocean, right? So I like nori. Everyone's obsessed with Irish moss right now. And for its nutritional benefits and also other things that they've heard. And I do think Irish moss is useful. I like dulse. Dulse is also very salty. You can use dulse actually to even season a salad. There's wakame. There's so many types of seaweeds. I find that seaweeds are also just really helpful for people who don't have a nutrient-dense diet and they need more nutrition in there. Just adding some seaweeds in, it's going to give you a lot more nutrition.
Wakame, can you comment on wakame for me briefly? And I'm going to bring up the next question.
What about it?
You like it or not? Or
yeah, I do.
Okay. Hibiscus tea, is that considered bitter? It's another question.
I don't really completely know. I think that it actually might be almost more on the sour side when it doesn't have sugar. But I'd have to look it up because from what I remember from hibiscus tea, it almost feels like it's, sour. But a lot of people put a lot of sugar in their tea, so don't put sugar in it because that won't make it a bitter.
Gotcha. This one, bitter foods in our children.
Yes. I'm so glad someone asked this question because I actually forgot something. And this is something I was talking to this woman about who actually also wrote a book about bitter foods. And we were talking about how, in addition to our genetics, when a woman is pregnant, that child's taste preferences are being shaped as well by what the mother eats. So you can influence what your child is going to eat before they even get out of the womb by eating a wide variety of foods, including bitter foods. And it's actually helpful because then when they come out the womb and they were actually going to want to eat broccoli versus telling you no because you ate it while that you were pregnant with them. So that part I found really interesting too. So there's just so many levels where our tastes can be, but yes, for children, please have them consume more bitter foods. It will help them not be sugar addicted. It will help them balance out. It will help them continue to like eating these vegetables later in life as well.
I know Dr. Palmer, you're going to be talking to us about the benefits of sleep on fairly soon, but can you make a note to talk to us about the diet of the pregnant woman as how do you feed the child in utero? I think that would be an interesting topic because it's going to be an important thing for us to sort of consider because, pregnant moms, I mean, we got to cut this thing off at the pass, if you will. And we know that we can diagnose atherosclerotic disease in utero. So, and kids at a very young age are getting atherosclerotic disease as well as other diseases. So, consuming foods in utero is really important. I know we're coming up on the hour. We're going to go, just to let our viewers know, we're going to go a little bit on the other side because there's some interesting questions coming up. And I also want to quiz Dr. Floyd on farming because he's our resident expert in growing food. We talked about this earlier, and I don't want to get on this, but will eating bitters help me sense my gallbladder? Here's a question about gallbladders and bitter foods. You did say the receptors in the gallbladder, but we didn't talk about the liver. Bitter foods and gallbladder. Any comments?
Well, they help you. The gallbladder produce bile. When you don't have one, that would be, I think, a question for one of you docs.
Yeah, well, one thing about the gallbladder is that, the bitter foods, like you mentioned, Podiatry, which is an antifungal, antiviral, and it really works on funguses. So a lot of bacteria, mold, funguses, and virus will live and thrive in your gallbladder, and it can lead to, cholecystitis, inflamed gallbladder. So if you're using them, it can be beneficial as far as controlling that. So it will have a benefit, But again, I want to stress, I know we have to use bitters, but it seems like the audience wants to use that one bullet to use bitters to do everything, but bitters should be a part of your overall diet, like you're saying, also that it can complement everything you're doing and not just be the answer to gallbladder disease or something.
So you're saying there's no bitter bullet? Is that what you're trying to say? Should we search for a better bitter bullet?
You need a battery machine gun, okay?
Machine gun, yeah. Now, speaking of bitter, real quick, Chaca piedra, now that we're on herbs, was an herb that was mentioned to me by one of my mentors a while back. It's supposed to be a liver cleanser. Is that a bitter herb also? Chaca piedra?
I don't even know what that is.
I'm familiar with it, but I'm not sure if it's in that category. I would have to check, but it's a wonderful herb that helps. It in Spanish, it means to break stone or break stone, break up kidney stones and gallstones. But it's a wonderful tea, and I would suspect it may be a bitter herb, but it is wonderful to make into the tea, and it helps flush and break up potential stones and sludge in the gallbladder in the urinary tract. So, but if there are symptoms of kidney stones, it's wonderful if you can flush and to push that herb, Chaca piedra or breakstone.
So I'm going to do a couple of other questions from the galley, and then I want to go back to food grown locally seasoned. But I want to hit that topic just briefly before we go off air because I think it's important. Donna A asked a question about bento seaweed sheets. Are they safe to eat? PAX does not say what kind of seaweed it is. So bento seaweed, I guess you have to look at the ingredients, but anyone want to comment on that?
Nori. It's probably some sort of nori. But back to what Dr. Atkins says, like it's better to get seaweed from places you know where it came from these days and ages.
Yeah, we may have to.
There was a seaweed source in Oregon, Washington. It is one company that harvested in that area, and they tested seaweed. But anywhere south of in the California coast and going south, I think the sea is kind of dangerous there because it's really toxic. But that's one area, and supposedly in the North Atlantic, but I don't know the source in North Atlantic near Nova Scotia. In that area, they had supposedly cleaner seaweed.
We might, for the next time, Esosa, maybe we can come up with a list collectively, just a couple of places where we know that it's good. We can leave with our audience. The last question from the galley is going to be from Patrice Moshe. Any thoughts about ingesting small amounts of bentonite clay regularly? I was advised to do this during my first juice feast.
Okay.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
I would say the bentonite clay is basically a heavy metal detoxifier. It picks up heavy metals and things like that. So it goes back to our history historically of eating dirt. And when people talk about eating dirt, because number one, you do get minerals in it, but it also absorbs the leads, the cadmiums, the mercuries, the arsenic, and other heavy metals. So I don't think it has a negative effect, and small amounts should be okay.
I would just add to that if you're going to take bentonite clay internally, you need to drink a lot of water. You can cause problems for yourself if you don't.
Yes, because it's clay and it will harden up.
Mm-hmm.
So last comment I wanted, which is a few minutes over, and we're not going to be much longer in respect of everybody's time, but at the beginning, we raised a comment about how they changed the food, because this whole issue of consuming bitter foods and the like, and we say, okay, eat arugula, broccoli, and so on, and I want to talk a little bit about the source of these foods, because the whole aspect of genetic modification and other types of things in terms of how the food is raised and so on. In the food classification system, we talk about, conventional versus organic versus food that's cultivated in the wild. And I may have to sort of rethink that because as Dr. Palmer mentioned, organic food meets a certain standard. And my recollection, there are different organic standards. I don't know. Maybe there are different regulating bodies that's sort of national, but I think California has some sort of regulations that may be different. I haven't kept up with that, but what are your thoughts on sustainably grown foods versus organic out of the supermarket versus conventional? Anybody have any insight? Floyd, I think you have insight on this.
Well, when it comes down to it, the sustainably grown for me would probably be the best. Organic is good, but again, organic is a standard that's set by the government that allows certain pesticides, a certain amount of pesticide, parts per billion. So they have a standard they go by. They never said it was completely pesticide free or chemical free. So, like for instance, the Working Environmental Group has a list of the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. And they identify foods that are high in pesticides and low in pesticides. But even on their list, most of the high in pesticide foods has up to 15 pesticides on the food. And the ones that are considered clean has less than 2 pesticides. And for me, I don't want any pesticides. So that means that if I really want to choose a source, if it's 2, so 2, it's a little, like you say, back a little poison, or you want a lot of poison. So you go with sustainably grown, where you can control what's on the food if you know the local farmers, the local growers, and you know how they grow their food and what they use, and if they are as committed to you about being chemical free or pesticide free. So when you use the word chemical free, it should be based on the fact that you don't add any chemicals other than natural plant cycles to limit pest control in your food or limit the weed control in your food. So sustainably grown or chemical free, grown by local growers, is something you can trust. You can actually put your trust in. Because when it gets to agribusiness, when you look at the big companies that do organic and get labeled that way, they have leadways, and I don't know if they always follow the guidelines. I had one of my patients one time tell me, just because they put the sticker in it with the 9 in front of it, how do I know the teenager in the back who was labeling the fruits got them mixed up? He could add the apples with the regular apples. So, you think you're eating apple because you say, oh, the label says this. But what's in your food? What's in your water?
Wow, that's amazing. Thanks for that insight. So really, Bernard, we're going to address this topic a little bit more, and as we have these different discussions, we're going to dive deeper in some of these subtopics. But the how you procure your food, I think, is a very important topic that we'll address in the show, and we'll go from there. Anyway, so our time is past up, and I want to say thank you again to my expert panel. This has been a very enlightening show, and I've learned a lot, and I hope our listeners and our online visitors have learned a lot. And if you've learned a lot, just say so in the chat. We got a couple of seconds as I close out. If you learned a lot, just say, yes, I learned a lot in the chat. Just give us some ideas. And also, if you have any other questions or information, please share that in the chat. You can also do that once we close out. You go on, share this with your friend, and the other comments. I also look at the comments that we get post airing. But again, we'll be on next week. What's our topic next week? We're going to be talking about sleep. Is that right?
Sleep, yes.
Health benefits of sleep. So Dr. Palmer is going to put us to sleep next week with the health benefits of sleep.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully
Hopefully not.
Everybody needs sleep. Everybody needs sleep.
Will make us all calm about that. But we do look forward to that topic. And sleep is a very important topic. And quality of sleep and quantity of sleep, all of that goes hand in hand. But again, until we meet next week and talk about sleep, we want to ask all our people to make sure you keep it fresh, natural, and live. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.